right, Lindsay, you are up.
Thanks. Well, hello, everybody. Like Daniel said, thank you for taking some time out of your lunch break to join us today. This is our third speaker series session. So if this is the first session you've been able to attend, welcome. And if you've been to one of our other sessions, thanks for coming back. So just a quick overview of what the speaker series is. So Impact Austin has really put together this 2023 speaker series, and it's a virtual learning community resource that really will help us with strategic planning as it gets underway around all kinds of future issues, if it's housing, economic development, food access and equality, parks, open spaces, just to name a few. So we're bringing in dynamic national practitioners and then pairing them with some local leaders who we have on our call today as well. And really the goal of these sessions is to offer some inspiration by sharing both practical models, working projects, and ideas from across the country. And then within our city as well, to really help to inform innovative solutions to help with the challenges and opportunities that we have within Austin, Minnesota. So today with us, we have Yvonne Gonzalez and Brad Lonberger. These guys have extensive experience in planning communities. So really excited to hear them talk today. And then alongside them, we have Craig Clark and Trish Harren will also be talking just about some of the local ways that we've worked together, our city and community. So, city and county. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Daniel already mentioned this, but if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And we will either try to get to them on the call today, or we will follow up with kind of a question and answer document too, because we really want to make sure that these sessions have legs and we can use them in the future as well. So with that, I will pass it on. And we can get the presentation started. So thanks again for coming today.
Thanks everyone for coming. I'll kick it off and let me share my screen. So just a brief overview. So the presentation today is really about cultivating planning and development alignment between cities and counties. And so the structure is we'll do some brief introductions. I'll allow each panel member to introduce themselves. And then we'll go into a few topics, 3 topics with an example that we've worked on. And then we'll just start, having a conversation with Craig and Trish about Austin and Mower County and just exploring kind of where they're at in the alignment, planning and development, and just kind of what have they already done and what's on the horizon. And so with that, we can start with our introductions. Brad, if you want to go first.
Sure. Brad Lonberger with Place Strategies, traditionally been on the private side as an urban planner and an architect.
And so I'm Yvonne Gonzalez. I've been on the public side. So I've been an urban planner for regional planning commissions, municipalities, COGs, small and large towns. And I'm originally from Iowa. So, Austin, Minnesota is a little bit close to my home. I'm in Fort Worth, Texas now, but everyone knows I'm still an Iowan when I talk. So that's 2 of us from Place Strategies, and then from the regional administration, Craig, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, Craig Clark, administrator for City of Austin. Been here a little over 8 years here in the city.
And then is Trish on?
Yeah, Trish is having some technical difficulties, so she will be on here relatively quickly, but she is our county administrator for Mower County.
Here she is.
Okay, we'll move on, and then let me know when Trish is on.
There she is.
I'm on.
Hey, Trish.
Good afternoon.
Perfect timing. So we
Technology.
are introducing ourselves. Trish, if you want to say a couple sentences on yourself.
Sure. I am the Mower County Administrator. I have been in Austin with Mower County for about 5 years, and I have been in county administration for about 20 years.
Perfect. Okay, so one of the first topics that we have is just regional planning. And so we want to understand what we mean by regional planning. And so I'll get started with just education wise, what are these things that we're talking about? And so when we're talking about comprehensive and area planning, it includes comprehensive plans and small area plans that capture a vision. So we're talking about long-term plans based off of public engagement, off of the residents, the people that live in these areas. What do they want to see? What do they expect to see in the future? And then how do we create a plan that is adopted, which allows us to be able to administer across administrations, across councils, county commissioners, and keeps us focused on a goal. And then development and land use, includes future land use plans, zoning, subdivision ordinances to enforce that vision. But so these are typically parts of comprehensive and area planning at different scales. Mobility and connectivity includes a master thoroughfare plan. Basically, how are we moving and connecting different parts of the county, cities, whatever municipality we're looking at, and planning for that future. And then economic development, strategic planning to target markets and sectors that have been identified as missing or need to be enhanced. What are we missing? Where are we going outside of the county or the cities that we live in order to get that service or that retail? And so those are, 4 components that we typically look at the regional planning level. And then as far as stakeholders, it's really everyone. And so regional partnerships, when we're looking at these types of comprehensive plans, are ideally the public organizations. So they're going to be the champion that lead on some of these projects because they're the municipality that's going to be there afterwards and administer a lot of these comp plans. And so cities and towns and counties, those are your public organizations. But there's also a lot of partnerships from the state and federal organizations like the DOT, FEMA, Corps of Engineers, but then also your developers and builders, your heavy users of, when a developer and a builder is looking at a different area for development, they're looking at the future land use plan, the zoning. What does your development ordinance say? What are your long-term visions that typically have an infrastructure component? Where are areas that are ripe for development? And so that includes land developers, residential and commercial builders, but also nonprofit organizations. There's tons of housing organizations that are out there developing for a purpose and a mission. And then most of all, the businesses and residents that make up the cities and the counties. So local and regional businesses and the residents and visitors that use Mower County and Austin as their home or family lives here. And so the vision really, is garnered from an engagement process. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. Brad, anything else that you'd like to add here before I move on?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Trish and Craig, anything here, just local, throughout the process, I'll kind of ask and see if there's anything you want to add. And then I'll have some questions, but just from the local context of Austin and Mower County, anything in here that, might be different, or maybe better context as far as what it's like to in these regional partnerships or existing comprehensive planning or existing small area plans or regional connections. Anything to add here?
No, I don't think so. Just generally the comprehensive plan is our canvas to try to cast a vision for the community. A lot of people don't necessarily involve themselves with that. And that's part of the exciting process that we're talking about here, is how to make it more tangible to the average Austinite and impactful for our community.
Great.
And I would just add that I think historically, the city and the county have not worked closely together in developing a comprehensive plan. So even though the city of Austin is part of the people that we serve, we've done our plans at separate times and maybe haven't coordinated as well as we can, but we have the right people at the table, I think both at the city and the county right now, so that as we engage in planning for the future, I think we'll see a big shift.
That's great. One interesting thing, and Craig had mentioned in one of our meetings was, this region is one of the only ones that doesn't have a council of governments or regional planning commission, that's looking at regional type planning or helping small communities that can't afford, planning or just development staff. And so that's another thing that's a little bit unique about this area is that, in Minnesota, there's some pretty big regional council of governments or just organizations that are looking at regional planning. There isn't one for this area. So I think that's also something a little unique to this area where maybe we have to do a little bit more intense regional partnership to be able to, because we don't have that big regional that includes different counties and cities within its membership. So that's another kind of context that was very surprising. Kind of going into it. But let me talk a little bit about comprehensive planning, because that's one of the big topics here. And so I want to just talk a little bit about it. What is comprehensive planning? A consensus vision by the community in a policy document to guide administrators. And so that's a lot of verbiage. What it is, it's a target, a guide for the developers, the administration, everyday users, when you're looking at, where's my community going in the long term? What are we trying to strive for? And so, this area is largely agrarian. And so we want to make sure we capture that. And we're cognizant of the direction that we're going. And so the reason why comprehensive planning is important is that it guides decision makers and continues the process through administrations. And what we mean by that is it's not contingent on an individual person. So, Craig is amazing and Trish is amazing, but not everything should hang in the balance of just them. It should be the target of a community is going to outlast any one person. And so how do we make sure that that continues on? And so who is the comprehensive planning for? And so it's for everyone. It's for the residents and business owners. First of all, buy-in. They want to be part of the process as far as creating that vision and being involved. But it also creates an accountability. So momentum towards a certain vision and goal, so that residents and business owners can also be held accountable when something happens or something, a new development comes in. Remember, before we were in a contentious state, we went ahead and we agreed on this vision, and this is how it stacks up against that. Bringing in some rationality for that is also a helpful guidance, especially from the administration side. So I've always been on the public planning side, so I'm always thinking about how do we implement this? How do we use this every day? How do we reference it in our everyday lives and how we use it? And so how can organizations work together? And so a lot of it's through the process. So, a helpful comprehensive planning process involves everyone. Plenty of engagement and outreach, and it can take a while. It can be a little intensive as far as the type of outreach that we have, but it pays off at the end, making sure that we get the type of engagement that we're wanting. A lot of communities, they don't come with that. For so long, a comprehensive plan has just been a plan that has been necessary to have because we're doing a rezoning and we need to have something that by state law that we need to have to judge it on. It's a lot more than that. And so how do we work together and bring in stakeholders, which creates accountability, but also creates a benchmark so that we know what we're trying to get to. So that's comprehensive planning as far as how it impacts individual people, but also developers, builders, and staff administration for the municipality that this is for. So that's the educational component. And so now I want to talk a little bit about an example that we have worked on, Brad and I, and Daniel as well. Brad, I'll kick it off to you if you want to talk a little bit about Rogers County and the municipalities within it.
Sure, thanks. Rogers County, Oklahoma, sits northeast of Tulsa County, in northeast Oklahoma. It is a growing community, heavily agrarian as well, but has some key city centers of Claremore and Catoosa. At the same time, we're actually doing comprehensive planning for the city of Catoosa as well, where the blue whale of Catoosa sits on Route 66. By combining the two processes together, we're able to have a greater impact on the level of engagement that you would otherwise see from just a single city plan or a small area plan. And for that reason, we're able to get exceptional responses from across the county on both planning processes, as well as engagement in our Catoosa downtown concept plan process, our downtown master plan. The engagement process stemmed from actual activations throughout the county, which really allowed us to understand the different people that live in the county. It's a vast area, and we're doing a 30,000 foot level plan. We need to understand the experiences within the county and how people live their lives. And so working in partnership with 7 of the 10 cities that opted to work with us, we were able to start to look at what the experiences were for each of these areas of town, what they struggled with directly, both at the city side and as the community and residents. And then also how we were able to work together to find resolutions that for problems that they didn't know they had. And so I think one of the good quotes we got was from a mayor of Talala. It was about 250 people. She said, "I think this is the first time I've ever seen all of these organizations represented in one meeting." And when we had our advisory committee meeting kickoff, we had all of them there working together and talking and communing. So it was really impressive to see how much collaboration has built off this process.
And one thing I'll add is just, you don't know what you don't know. And so a lot of the times, to Brad's point, is that just being in the same room and talking about what you are doing within your own municipality, town, city, county, you find connection points of, hey, I was working on that, or I was working with that developer, and this is kind of what we agreed on, or there's always connections that happen naturally just by being in the same room. Not to mention if there's a coordinated target or goal for the area in the county, it compounds itself on what can be accomplished once we know what everyone is focusing on. And so with that, I'd like to kind of just take this moment to ask Craig and Trish on, maybe some of those collaborative projects that maybe are already happening, that you guys want to speak on and are continuing to flourish, I guess, in Austin and in Mower County.
Sure, I can take that one. It's always kind of interesting when you don't compare yourself to outside communities. You don't know how unique we are in a lot of respects, but our Austin Home Initiative, where we offer tax abatement for 5 years for any multifamily or single family new construction, that's a cooperative effort with the county, city, and school district. That's pretty rare in Minnesota to see all 3 taxing jurisdictions participate in those types of things to spur economic growth and provide more housing options. Some of the things that we're involved with come about through environmental compliance. Our Turtle Creek area that we've annexed and had to deal with failing septic systems. Most recently, we got notice from the county that they're doing a community assessment report for the Dobbins Creek area. Again, another area that developed on the outskirts of town and having some failing septic system issues that kind of necessitate us working together and in a constructive way, and then really kind of learning from mistakes that were started 30 plus years ago and trying to change those. We're working on extraterritorial board to try to work together to try to avoid those types of occurrences happening again. Other things like our joint law enforcement center. We've worked with the county and Scott Felton on tax forfeiture and how that integrates with nuisance housings that we see come about in the city. Our affordable housing project over by the post office, the county was a great partner in that one. And probably our largest shining jewel of recent is the New Tech project, where the city and county and DCA came together in promoting Peptone facility, a bioscience Peptone facility that would be $40 million of added value in our community and promoting our tax-based growth. So those are some exciting ones that I guess I would point to.
Trish, anything to add?
You know, I think Craig did a good job of nailing this one. I would just add that we did a commercial abatement. So we've had this housing tax abatement that we've done together. And recently we did a commercial abatement for a childcare facility. So we are starting to partner on solving some of these, you know, systemic issues in addition to housing and growing our economy.
One thing that I'll point to that Craig mentioned was some of the infrastructure conflicts between rural and urban. And so that's something that we had to deal with on this project, you know, working with the city of Catoosa and Rogers County, you know, as anything in the, you know, extraterritorial jurisdiction of cities gets annexed, a lot of times they were developed with rural standards. And so that infrastructure, typically most of the time is not up to the standard of the urban environment. You know, there's no curb and gutter, there's no stormwater infrastructure, there's no, you know, even the roadways, they're built for a more rural environment, and so less traffic. And so in Catoosa, you know, they had annexed a large portion of the county, and all of that infrastructure to be put in, it wasn't really looked at. And so now they're having to replace and at a crazy cost of retrofitting and kind of going back in and redoing work. So, you know, part of the solution there is working with the county to make sure that, hey, maybe within that extraterritorial jurisdiction, maybe there is a different standard than just your typical county standard. And so that way, if it ever is annexed, it's not mandated to, but at least it's a little closer to what that city town infrastructure needs or standard would be. And so we're working and trying to implement that in the development code. And I think that's a great segue into the next topic, which is development regulations. And I'll have Brad step in and talk a little bit about some of those.
Yeah, so as we work with cities to look at updating their zoning, we often find conflicts between their subdivision and other ordinances at the same time. So we've begun to create combined development regulations that are used to coordinate development in its entirety through the city, and in Rogers County's case, the county as well. And that really starts to give it a one-stop shop kind of effort with all your development regulations. They all sit in the same chapter and they talk directly to each other versus two separate documents that otherwise need to be consistently connected and stitched together. This is important because it really creates a clear expectation of what developers and builders must do, especially when you're talking about creating a new or revitalizing a downtown, looking at what the vision is and being able to translate that into development regulations that set expectations for the minimum viable standard. So that way we're promoting that value creation and economic development within those central business districts. Development regulations are for everyone. From a resident standpoint, it sets expectations of what your neighbor is required to do. It allows you to understand that your investment is going to be for the long term, because there's a level of expectation that's set. And also there's for developers, in many cases, we try to provide flexibility in the design. of buildings and how they're treated when you start to build, because really focusing more on the walkability, the form of the central business districts. Each context or area that we're working in has its regulations built for that type of lifestyle. And so we're able to really hone in on what the expectations are from everybody. And how we work together through aligned development regulations, development municipalities can streamline the development process. And in many cases, with a county and city partnership, in Rogers County, for instance, we're working on setting expectations of subdivision rules and building streets and utilities within the fence line, within that extraterritorial jurisdiction of the cities, in the effort to understand that those will likely be annexed, and we want to make sure that those infrastructure pieces are brought up to speed. But also that the partnership between the county and city ensures that what's being built in the county is respectful to its neighbors in the city. It's building on what the city's trying to do. So it creates a clear partnership between the two. And we've been working with the city of Aledo, Texas. It's about 5,000 people southwest of Fort Worth. It's been a hot spot for relocating if you want to be in the great school district in Fort Worth area, but does have a historic town center. Actually, the school district is much bigger than the city. So people often think that Aledo is gigantic population-wise because the school district is so big. But they have focused on specifically residential growth for many years to the detriment of their downtown. And so through a planning process, we were able to create a new downtown master plan and are currently working through a unified development code, the subdivision and zoning signage and a number of other development standards to make sure that the historic downtown isn't lost. And that new development, which we're getting lots and lots of ranches being constructed or redeveloped as housing developments and mixed use developments, looking at how those meet the vision of the city of Aledo.
And I'll jump in a little bit on this one. So, one of the things is I'm always focused on implementation. How are we using, what we have? And so it was a funny story in Aledo where, the community came out and they're like, hey, yes, we want a vibrant downtown. We want vibrant shops. We want sit down restaurants. We want all this stuff. Yes, we want, residential, foot traffic, things that make a downtown vibrant. And then we started looking at their code, and their downtown code, tons of conflicts with their subdivision code, but didn't allow residential within the downtown. And so, it's one of those things where a comprehensive look at where the vision is going, where does the community want to go, but then also what are the rules that are in place that are going to maybe be a hindrance or stop that type of development, in really looking at everything. I've always, I'm a big subdivision code person. I know it's a little nerdy, but I really like the ministerial process of taking a look, and there are so many conflicts all the time. Every single time we look at a new city, a subdivision code was done in the 80s, and then the zoning code has been kind of piecemealed over amendments over 30 years, and all of a sudden there's a lot of conflicting language. A variance can be very different in a subdivision code versus a zoning code, and so those types of conflicts, it can be pinpointed when you're looking at, first of all, a visioning document. Where do we want to go to? What's our target? That aligns us in the community and administrations on where we want to be. But it also gives us a target of how do we need to cater our regulations to be able to support that. Now we've got a very clear goalpost of what we need to get to. Whereas before it's just kind of, band-aids. We're just band-aid that we found a conflict here because of this specific development, and it's all reactive and not proactive. And so Aledo has been really great example of how that works and how we kind of figure out how do we get to the ultimate goal of having a well-run system, well-run regulations with a vision that the community can get behind. And so with that, like to kick over to Craig.
Real
and
quick, the Alito, it all stemmed from a place accelerator that we
Yep.
did with Daniel. And I know you all have been working with him too. It really got the topic of what is the future of Alito for our community, and it became a marching order for reelection. We need to activate our spaces. We need to create these experiences, and unintentionally became the marching orders for a new council and a whole new staff. And so obviously there's tweaks and pulls as you go, but those are the growing pains of trying to create an experience for your residents and your businesses.
And to that point, it all started from, so Daniel's Place Accelerator, which is, I think it reminded me, Brad, it was a 2-day workshop. And then that kind of just got everyone involved. It really kickstarted the process. And then that led to a downtown master plan. Those more long-term, bigger area, just really kind of focusing in on what we need to do to make sure that this downtown is what we want it to be. And that has, along with that, it's like, okay, we've got our vision now how do we enforce it? And so it's been a process of, getting people involved, and then it really energizes the rest of the process going forward. So it's been a really good kind of testing area for a lot of these things, and discovery of what do we need to be vibrant, especially a little bit different models, especially with the demand for residential. This is on the outskirts of Fort Worth. Fort Worth is continuously growing. There's so much demand. Alito's got, probably the best high school football team in the nation right now. And so everybody is trying to move to Alito. So lots of demand, a little bit different, but it is in the rural area of Texas, very similar to Mower County and Austin, without the huge city right next to each other. But with that, fill us in on, Craig, Trish, on maybe some of the similarities or differences, or just I know that there's an existing comp plan. Fill us in on when that was done, kind of where you're headed, like what are some conflicts maybe with on the development regulation side, anything kind of to that aspect of it.
Yeah, our comp plan was done in 2016, so we're going to be looking at doing a refresh of that. I think what Yvonne, what strikes me with your Alito test here is you don't know what you don't know in some respects, as far as they wanted to have a walkable community and vibrant community in their downtown, but didn't recognize the overall structure of their comp plan and how that played into it, and either detracted from that or supported that. So having that new view on our comp plan and being able to work through that process, if we want X, then we need to do Y, and be accommodating and those types of things. So that was an interesting point that you had there. And as our process moves forward to doing a new comprehensive plan, we can have more of those vibrant discussions and how those play out in the real world.
Trish, anything from the county side?
I would say that our comp plan is older than the city's, and it predates me. I do have our planning and zoning supervisor who's on, Angie Lepelt, and she maybe could speak to how old ours is. But I do think it was a dynamic process at the time that we created it, but it definitely needs to be updated. And hopefully this time we will do it more collaboratively with the city, and thinking about the downtown as a key aspect of the county as well, and the value that we place in the downtown increases the value for the whole county, which is really one of our key goals. So we can do the work we do, is to be thinking about those things and increasing the value of our county. Angie, I don't know if you can add anything about our comprehensive land use plan.
It actually predates me, but yeah, I'm very familiar with it, read it, refer to it. It was done in the early 2000s and it was adopted in 2003. And, our ordinance has made some amendments as some new technologies and things that have come up since then. But it's time for a refresh.
And kind of to that point, when we're talking about these comprehensive plan visioning documents, communities change over time. The way businesses operate and kind of residents, what a home from the 80s is very different from a home now, and businesses as well. Even since the pandemic, the retail and how it operates and kind of the multifaceted approach of, Uber and kind of pickup and delivery, and things change over time. And so none of these community vision documents should be set in stone. I think that's one thing that I think we need to make sure we're very clear on. Things change, and community perspectives change also. So not only how things work, but also how people view success and what the next 10 years will look like. And so refreshing these, every so often to make sure that they are still on target, I think is vital to any visioning document. Things change. The pandemic has showed us that just very recently. And so all very good points. And so I'll go into the third topic, and then maybe we can have just general questions at the end too, that all four of us can just talk about and converse on, and see if there's anything in the chat as well. But the next topic, really wanted to talk about guidelines and policies. And so this is everything else, and even part of the development equation as well. And so I'll talk a little bit about it, and then I'll bring an example. I couldn't go through this presentation without having an Iowa example, so I'm going to bring that in. And so regulation allowances. And so incentivizing, I know we talk about incentives a lot in economic development, but there are other types of incentives, and that's regulation based. So if you are wanting to come in and develop above this standard, we can make sure that your parking allowance is less if you bring in this, or so allowances that allow a developer to go above and beyond, or a builder, or just a resident that wants to improve their property. And so that's one avenue that can also help in trying to incentivize that community vision. Neighborhood planning programs. And so that sometimes there's an idea of what a neighborhood planning program is very general. And so small area planning, that's part of it, absolutely. And so, creating a downtown master plan, a small neighborhood plan that you take a look at, very kind of micro level of detail of what does this future land use look? How do we want this to develop? What are the connection points that need to happen? That is absolutely part of a neighborhood planning program, but it's so much more also. So long-term programming and connections, having amenities for those neighborhoods. And so when I talk about that, it's more access. And so I'll talk a little bit about an example in Iowa that I administered here in the next slide, but these planning programs can be so much more. And then the municipality system. And so, there are certain policies, resolutions that provide guidance to municipalities, that's counties, cities, things that are outside of zoning and subdivision codes. And so there's tons of resolutions, there's tons of policies and things. And so how do we structure those? First of all, how do we do them? Are they public? Are they sent out to everyone? Are they in an accessible area? But also, what do they say? There are things that we want to encourage, this type of development, or, our comp plan calls for more affordable housing or more housing variety to provide affordable housing. And how do we have policies in place to be able to support that? And then development guidelines, I'll talk a little bit about those also from my Iowa example. And so overlay districts and special districts that home in on the experience that's being nurtured. And so a lot of the times the comp plan, it's a 30,000 foot view. It's, hey, here's generally what we want to go for. Here are the areas that need to be focused on. Here's the connections that we want to make. The development guidelines can get a little more specific as far as, hey, you've got your minimum zoning definitions and regulations. Here is the things that impact a historic district or a special area for economic incentives or an area that provides a building improvement program, something like that. And so those are the four categories that I really want to talk about. And then as far as my example goes, so I was the senior planner in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I'm originally from Iowa, but wanted to talk a little bit about some of the up and coming programs that we worked on there. And so, we did do a comprehensive plan update that we did when I was there, but we also did neighborhood planning programs, and that included a program where neighborhoods could register, have access to police information, construction, public construction and improvement information, especially if it was going to impact roadways that were close to that neighborhood. Also, code enforcement items. Hey, maybe that neighborhood wants to use their HOA or anything to help improve or help a neighbor that's having, weeds come up or something like that. Better connections, but also improvement programs. Like we had a facade improvement program that I administered within a certain area where we wanted to revitalize. It was close to downtown, and it was a matching program. So the owner had to match or invest, and we would match up to a certain amount and have a certain amount of projects a year for that that were capped, incentivizing people to invest in their properties. And then we also had a lot of access to these neighborhoods that wanted to be connected. If you guys are familiar, we had a major flood in 2008. And so we had lots of reconstruction. We had a lot of emergency situations. And then we also had the derecho incident that really, had a lot of damages to the city. And so we created programs to help out and alleviate some of those issues. And then we also planned, it was a very bad incident, but we were able to, the silver lining is create some new planning and some momentum behind it. How can we keep what we need to keep? How can we move forward with things that are unsalvageable? And so working with the community, and the biggest part of this planning program, again, I kind of talked a little bit about it. Small area planning is not just a vision document that you have, but it's also a two-way communication system. And so in these times of emergency, we had a contact within certain neighborhoods that was a designated neighborhood representative that we could call upon for volunteers, for emergency information, mobilizing people. There's an incident, there's flooding here, evacuations here, with someone within that neighborhood. And so we were able to disseminate information, and they were able to tell us as well, hey, this is what we're seeing on the ground. And they're not city employees, but they were able to give us information that we needed in those emergency situations. So that's why I've always been a big proponent of neighborhood planning programs, not only for the visioning, but also for the long-term impact. So that's a little bit about Cedar Rapids. Now, first, Brad, anything you want to add as far as policies, guidelines, anything to the conversation?
No, that was great.
Okay, now our local context. Craig and Trish, tell us kind of anything pertaining to the situation, anything that you guys are already doing, things maybe that you've been wanting to explore or even ask a question on. Please go ahead.
I guess the only thing I would comment is, building upon that, what we've done with the Velocity Group report, with looking at more of a neighborhood approach. Certainly the downtown master plan and understanding how the downtown plays in the broader city perspective, and how important that is. The tax density that we have in our downtown compared to other areas, and just looking at it from a different perspective. But I think that's a new area for us to explore and maximize as we look for a more of a neighborhood approach. as we move forward.
And then Trish, I know, I mean, you guys are more in the county, but you guys have a lot of stake in Austin because of all your offices being there, correct?
Yes, and I think Angie, our planning and zoning supervisor, put something in the chat. We are, you know, I think being exposed to this program today just reminds me of how important it is that our staff, so it's not just me and not just Craig, but all of our staff get exposed to this conversation. They understand what's going on with what Craig was just referring to with Accelerating Austin, so that we have the people who are on the ground, who are the planners and who are engineers. I think I see some city engineers on, and that we have the people around the table. I look at the list of participants today, and I think they are primarily the group of people that we need to get together to start to have our conversation about looking at our comprehensive land use plan. And so I think this, I'm just going to comment that this meeting today, this training today, I think will be really valuable for us so that we can start moving together in a direction to see how our, you know, how we impact each other, and the decisions we make in our planning really has an impact, and we have much more power to do great things when we work together.
Definitely. Okay, so regional coordination. And so we touched on a lot of these things, and this is really the last slide that I have, other than, you know, taking a look at the chat to see if there's any questions, but regional group exposure. And so it sounds like, you know, Craig, Trish, it's already happening. So amplifying, you know, making sure that there's cooperation that naturally happens by being in the same room. I can be in person, virtual, but the more exposure that you guys have together with different municipality officials, the more coordination will naturally happen. And so having a structure to that, on top of, you know, creating, you know, something through a comprehensive plan update or regional, you know, plan that takes into consideration what the county is doing, what the city is doing, even smaller cities that are outside of that, you know, it creates that natural cooperation. Administration partnerships, and so education on who is administrating, and so lots of times there's a lot of overlaps, and so you just don't know who is doing that for the county. You know, who's approving subdivision plats for the city versus the county, and you know, is there overlap when it comes to the extraterritorial jurisdiction? Is there an agreement that, you know, both municipalities are looking at how plats are done, or is it just one or the other? You know, who has the staff and the capacity to be able to do that? Figuring those out and making sure that everyone's in the know, I think is part of that regional group exposure, but it also creates lasting administration partnerships that can be handed down across administrations. And then long-term planning, all of this has been long-term planning. It's just, you know, again, I've always been on the public side, so I'm always hyper-focused on the implementation. How are we doing this? How will I use it as staff? And so a long-term plan allows me to be able to reference something when I am going to my county commissioners, my city council, you know, individual departments. Hey, we've got a goal here that we're trying to do. Let's try to, okay, how does this proposal align us with that? So that we get some consistency in kind of how those decisions are being made long term. And so those are the three big things that I wanted to talk about, and just kind of, you know, focus in on. Brad, any other words kind of from your side that you want to add?
No, just hearing the local experience and what you all have already started putting together is really inspiring. And so as we look to the future of collaboration, you know, you can't go. It's always better to have more communication than less. So.
And for our local context, Craig and Trish, what does it look like? You know, being more coordinated, or you know, how do we continue to have those conversations, make it more structured, or maybe even, you know, public engagement process coming out of this? Fill us in on your thoughts.
Yeah, I guess I think the comprehensive plan process, when we did it in 2016, we brought people together. I think really focusing on how it's impactful more to Austin residents would be helpful, so we can, sometimes the policy wonkiness gets maybe a little bit too overextended in some of those documents, but really drilling down on some of those things. I think, as Trish mentioned earlier, we've got the right people at the table wanting to collaborate in an effective way. So I think we're maybe at a unique time to be able to make those things happen. And then understanding, to some extent, you get what you ask for in your plan documents, and making sure that we're thinking those things through. So we know when we come to the fork in the road, which is the right direction to go, based on our plan that we've given careful consideration towards.
I would agree. And I think the word intentional comes to mind. I think, we as a county and the city need to be just more intentional about doing some co-planning. One of the things that Craig does routinely is he looks at our agenda and sees what's on there, like either our planning commission agenda or a board agenda. And so he'll give me a call and say, hey, I see that something's going on with this piece of property. Are you sure that's the right decision, or can we chat about that? And so that's kind of how even our conversations about joint planning really began. And, unfortunately at the county during the Great Recession, we cut our planning and zoning department from, 8-10 people to 1. And, when you have one person that's trying to manage all of this, and fortunately, she's still with us today, and that's Angie, who's on the call. There's only so much you can do when you are just trying to survive each day. And we're shifting from that. So we're trying to move to a place where we're staffed correctly, because you need that. You need to have staff who have time to put planning as a priority. So I think from the county side, that's where we're at. We want to be intentional. We're trying to staff up so that we can be more planful.
It's great. Lindsay, Daniel, do we have any questions?
No, I'm sorry to interject again here. I see Daniel in the chat talked about infrastructure and extending that. The general math of, you see an area outside the city and think it's prime for development. These infrastructure costs have just been grown exponentially, and it's just generally a linear foot proposition, and trying to think of that in terms of what that means for the municipality, what trade-offs we make for redevelopment of other areas in the city. Those things, I think, just be out of financial necessity, really beg a close look on that, and that the development patterns of old don't necessarily hold true going forward. So appreciate Daniel mentioning that in the chat, and wanted to add to that.
You had brought up someone, Tom Yezi, was an invite that you brought together to talk about the power of this collaboration to even attract new investment. Do you want to just do a real quick introduction, Craig, to Mr. Yezi on the call?
Yeah, Tom Yezi is CEO of New Tech. We've just been excited to work with him. I think he saw some of the advantages that we had from our agricultural base and interest in the bioscience that we have coming forward with the University of Minnesota, and having the Hormel Institute here. They've made recent investment of $40 million in our Creekside Business Park. Tom, are you here with us?
Yes, I am.
Job of explaining than I, and much more eloquent on top of it. So I'll turn it over to Tom Yezi.
Yeah, so I think New Tech Bioscience is a pretty good case study for this type of project, because it was really something where things started with the DCA with John Gary, who we had the first introduction, who brought the project, sort of presented it to the city. And really, when we look at it, it was something that without the cooperation of the city, the county, and then you even include the state, I would say this project doesn't get done. It's, for a company like ours, very particular in the site selection process, and it's a very competitive process. And one thing that we found through that is that it really was the cooperation between the city and the county that actually got this done. And so from that standpoint, we always consider ourselves very good at working with both from the private sector with, the public sector, when we started the company using, angel tax credit money, as well as doing development work at the University of Minnesota, things like that. So from that standpoint, as we built the company, we've had just great partnerships, and, I can't say more of how that, those active partnerships and working with the different groups, they all really have to come together to show both the company that you want that business there, and then really to get it done, because they're big undertakings. Then the other thing that was, I would say unique to us is that, we weren't really what would be a nationally recognized brand or company. And so, that does create more risk. And so I think another thing that happens through that, with that relationship, you get a little more shared risk and things like that, which can help, drive that to get the deals done. And, and then, for us so far, it's worked out great, and we seem to be, partnerships working great. I think we're delivering, and the city's delivered. So it's been, a very good overall situation for us. Yep.
That's great. Thank you, Tom.
Mhm.
So I'm looking through the chat, seeing if there's any questions that we can ask or.
So Yvonne, a quick question on the process, because we've got 4 minutes left, but Tom, you brought up that alignment between the county, the city, and DCA as it relates to it takes a village to get folks there. Real quickly, what was the first connection point? How did you start this conversation with the team? And Craig, Trish, and even John, because I know you're on the call, how did you guys work together? What was that? You get the call from Tom, and he's like, yeah, let's do this. And then you kind of build the team around it. Can you just touch base on that really quickly on how you guys worked on this project?
I can cover the very initial piece and things. So what we did is we work with a group called the Community Venture Network. We've used them before, and what they do is there was a group, and they sort of have economic development people from communities in the Midwest come together, and then companies present at those meetings, and then you sort of get connections to people who are interested in potentially hosting that business. And that was the initial contact we had with John at DCA. And then, after we, kind of come down to a secondary meeting and things, then he obviously behind the scenes is presenting it to the city, the county, things like that. But that's how our interaction started. And again, we always look at, what John did with a lot of this, taking a lot of leadership in, bringing us there and generating that interest. It was, that was sort of the beginning of it, and it worked well.
And maybe just as a backdrop, I know we're running out of time, is that the city and the county have something that we work together with the DCA on called Grow Austin. And we had worked with many other companies trying to get them to, come to Austin. And I would say we had, a few engagements even that got broken off at the altar, and we never made it all the way there. And so it was so exciting to actually have New Tech come, and we made it all the way to the altar, and we are kind of living happily ever after right now, and going to hopefully grow the family a little bit, Tom, right?
Absolutely. Definitely.
And I think a lot of that, heading into it was purposeful work that informed John when the opportunity presented itself that Tom mentions at the Community Growth Network. John's doing an assessment of who might be a good fit for that based on the work that we've done in advance of that, and bring those entities together where we focus our efforts around entities that fit, and New Tech was a home run. So we partnered, Tom mentioned the state incentives. We partnered with that and the Grow Austin program that Trish mentions to try to bolt on another incentive to differentiate our community compared to another, and really understands that we wanted to be pre-positioned when we learned of a New Tech. How can we respond effectively and quickly to those projects that come our way in a highly competitive environment? And as Trish said, we're we're married now and enjoying the benefits of that. So
One other comment I should make, Ivan, is that the second alternative was in Iowa. These guys took it away.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay.
So Yvonne and Brad in particular, and Tom, thank you, Trish and Craig and John on the phone here, recognizing that how much this vision of who you are and what you are captured within a comprehensive plan in and of itself can attract business. Because Tom, what we heard is you saw the vision of the community, you recognize that your company aligned with what the community was talking about and where they want to move. And then you had a team on the ground that was actually living that vision, that they're saying, we got it down, we're driving this conversation. And so they actually lived into the promise that you initially saw within some of the processes. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely, because we sort of had kind of some definite criteria in the site selection process. And when we went through that process, I mean, that's what Austin could do, is just check the boxes. And it was, it's something we just are pleased, every day that this is, that we believe we made the right choice here. And so far, the input and the comments we've gotten back with the facility and things, that we absolutely, even more than ever, believe this is the right place for this facility and this the growth of this business. So it's great.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that we're 2 minutes over, even though we had about a 5-minute introduction, so we probably have 3 minutes left in the 1-hour video. Yvonne, Brad, Lindsay, Craig, Trish, John, I feel like I'm at the end of the Wizard of Oz going, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there. But is there anything else to add, guys, before we bring this awesome conversation to a close?
I would just add one final comment that I really think with all in so many things with economic development and with planning, it really is about relationships. And I think that is why New Tech came to town. I think that will be the foundation of our success going forward, is to continue to build relationships both in our community and with other people like our presenters today, who have gone before us and have some ideas and some answers for us, that we can build relationships and build partnerships.
Craig, final words of wisdom?
no, I just enjoyed the engagement with folks. So
Great.
thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Lindsay, anything to close with?
All I just wanted to say was thank you guys again. Really interesting information today. And our next speaker series is coming up April 27th from 9 to 10 a.m. So make sure you mark your calendars to join us again.
And what are we talking about?
Joe Minicozy for our next one. So it really, the topic is called Stepping Over a Dollar to Get a Dime, the Impact of Land Use and Community Development Decisions on City Resources. I think it's going to be a good follow-up to this conversation today.
Sounds like an awesome topic.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Continue these conversations in the streets and the coffee shops and the bars. This is good stuff, especially if you're not a policy wonk. You start mentioning code and people will be attracted to you like beautiful flies. It's very exciting commentary. So again, thank you, everybody. Hopefully we'll see you April 27th, 9 to 10, and go forth and prosper. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.